And the ongoing year-long trade war between the United States and China continues to heat up, especially after Trump's latest executive order effectively banning Chinese telecom giant Huawei from the U.S. And since the most recent round of trade talks broke down, China's foreign ministry spokesman Lu Kang said this, quote, "Because of certain things the U.S. side has done during the previous China-U.S. trade consultations, we believe if there is meaning for these talks, there must be a show of sincerity." So joining us to discuss all of this, former U.S. trade official and talk show host, Steve Gill. Steve, always appreciate you being on with us. Thanks for taking some time today.
Thanks, Manila.
So Trump declared a national emergency this week, paving the way for the Commerce Department to ban Huawei from doing most business here in the U.S. But Silicon Valley also relies pretty heavily on selling to China as well as getting components from there. For example, just last year, U.S. tech companies sold about $11 billion worth of products to Huawei. So will Silicon Valley push back on the White House over this?
I think they'll be concerned about it. I mean, a billion here, a billion there, pretty soon it adds up. So that 10 billion mounts pretty heavily. Keep in mind, though, that when President Trump was in Vietnam meeting with Kim Jong-un, the Vietnamese bought another $10 billion in Boeing planes to go with actually they bought another $3 billion, 10 more planes to go with the 20 they'd already purchased. So again, there's other avenues for the U.S. to continue to sell to countries other than China. There's a huge trade imbalance with China right now. We sell about $100 billion a year to China. We buy about a $600 billion amount from China. So as this trade war moves forward, keep in mind they've got a lot more to lose than we do, and you're already seeing companies move out of China to other locations that will provide resources to the U.S. So this is a dangerous game. The rhetoric is actually toning up on both sides of the U.S. and the Chinese, and I think that everybody's a little nervous about what's going to happen next.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there are ways to work around China, but no doubt they are one of the world's two largest economies. China's obviously a key market still for U.S. companies. So could China retaliate this week against these moves by shutting out U.S. businesses, hurting Wall Street and ultimately the U.S. economy?
Yeah, you're seeing the Chinese ratchet up their tariffs or their taxes on U.S. goods that are flowing in. For example, soybean farmers here in the U.S., agriculture producers have already been concerned about the increased tariffs that are keeping them out or reducing their sales into China. Now, the soybean producers here in the U.S. have been kind of the loudest complainers because we sell a lot of soybeans to China, have done so previously. About 60% of the U.S. soybean exports go to China.
Yeah.
The problem for China is there's not anybody else to get enough soybeans from if they shut us out. Brazil is one of the second largest producers of soybeans in the world. They already sell about 80% of their soybeans to China, so they can only make up so much of what the Chinese lose from us. So you're going to see price fluctuations, commodity fluctuations. While the farmers in the U.S. want to sell their soybeans, obviously, into China, there will be other markets, and once those other markets are exploited, you may see prices go up that could actually help farmers. Recently, farmers have seen a drop in the price for their soybeans from about $16 a bushel to $8 a bushel, which is why you're seeing the Trump administration pay close attention to what they're saying as they have their fears about what happens in the continued fights with China.
Sure. Let's stick with that for a second here. So you mentioned the farmers. Obviously, many of them are worried that their crops might rot for a second year in a row. The soybean farmers are especially concerned because they're so reliant on China. So a little bit of politics here, Steve. Do you think this will affect Trump's 2020 reelection campaign? Because doesn't he need the middle of America to reelect him?
Well, we certainly do. You need the Farm Belt. You need the Rust Belt. You need those battleground states in Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. But you also need that Indiana, the farmers in Kansas, Nebraska. Those are usually safe Trump states, but you want to make sure that you're not losing any ground as this trade war with China continues. Again, I think the key is what are the other markets that, whether it's agriculture products or other U.S. products, can make up for whatever losses come from a diminished access into China. China. Again, keep in mind, we only sell, and I say only, $100 billion a year to China. They buy $600 billion a year from us. So they're more dependent upon, or they sell $600 billion to us. So their market is a lot more dependent. Their economy is a lot more dependent on us than we are on them. And you're already seeing a huge capital outflow from China to other markets. For example, if you go into Walmart or other stores today, actually look at the shirts, look at the clothing. You're going to find Vietnam and India and Indonesia on those labels rather than China in a lot of cases, because companies are already moving their production to those other countries. So, for example, Vietnam has about a $30 billion trade relationship with us. We have about a $20 billion trade deficit. You know, 10 planes here, 10 planes there of Boeing aircraft makes up about a 10% loss in that deficit. And as companies move to Vietnam immediately, start making their products there from China and shipping them here, they face no tariffs as opposed to the 25% tariffs that are going in effect now.
Yeah, and certainly a lot of other Asian countries, since you brought up Vietnam, a lot of these smaller Asian countries are further developing because of China's wealth. So I'm sure we'll be doing more business with a lot of those smaller countries in Asia. As always, Steve Gill, appreciate your expertise on this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you're also going to see the bigger countries, South Korea and Japan, making up some of the gains.